So I know we're just a few minutes behind our schedule, but I do want to take a couple minutes to have some questions, discussions for any of the three speakers that we had in this session. I know there's lots of information that was shared, but let's open it up for questions for Michelle, Murray, or Sheldon, and Dr. Ruiz, Mr. Ruiz. Or we can just stand up, I think.
So I'm Melissa West. I work with Murray, obviously, on the Kidney X. I have a question for Sergio around the first presentation that you gave, because I thought you put out a number of really interesting ideas for people in the room to think about when they want to go for funding. What other support do you offer through your fund to help people become more business ready? So you had a great list of how you identify the ideal candidates, but then once you get them in, how do you actually support them? Or do you, I guess? Or are there other resources?
So I actually ran out of time, and I had a couple more slides on what the dynamics of our ecosystem. So the foundation steps in. It's got the nonprofit side of things. It invests when it's almost crazy, when it's very risky, but it also provides incubation. I'm also very into the process. So we'll provide partnerships, networking. We'll sit down with the entrepreneur, help them figure out a strategic pathway to commercialization. We'll figure out pivoting opportunities. We'll be able to connect them with other organizations. I think the NSF has the I-Corp, which is a program that accelerates the entrepreneurial aspect of the whole venture. So we'll also be able to just be a sounding board, be there for them every step of the way. Any questions, we'll go with them to future VCs or other people that are interested. We will be able to help with the marketing, helping them create an attractive branding website, make sure that we blast our community of thousands of donors that are mission-oriented with information that is going to be attractive to the community. As an M Fund, we also we have about 26 investors right now, and they're all mission-oriented. We have billionaires, we have professional VCs, we have family offices, we have just people that are very into the mission. They're not extremely wealthy, but what we do is we present these companies to them, and they're very, very friendly money that makes them easy, fundable ventures. So we provide a wide range of things, and yeah, I guess just the coaching, the mentorship is one of the most important things.
I wanted to ask about Kidney X, just wherever you went. Aha, there you are. I thought I heard that it was not limited to the U.S., that non-U.S. entities could also be involved. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. We know, first of all, this is a worldwide problem. We're aware of groups around the world, patient groups as well as biomedical technical groups who are very interested in what we're doing. We're all facing the same issues, and we wanted to be certain that the Kidney X Fund could accept money from other countries and other governments who want to participate, as well as in-kind contributions of scientific research. In my mind, I would view this really as an opportunity for people around the world to tackle this problem together. I'll throw out a personal note that may or may not get as far as I hope it will. You know, most of the companies that we build in biomedical is for profit. We create a product and we sell it. Currently in the U.S., dialysis is not for sale. Although companies make money from it, it's all publicly funded, it's a public resource. And I would like to see if we can create a bioengineered organ to also be a humanitarian public device system, whatever it turns out to be, that can be administered to all patients in need around the world.
Do you mind if I ask a specific question?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So, the Methuselah Foundation made a grant to Organovo to let one of its printers to an Australian entity to work on kidneys. The result of that was 3D human kidney assays that are architecturally relevant and recapitulate the ins and the outs that you would expect. And they are now attempting to move on to create implantable. I'm wondering if you're aware of that. Were they part of the first Kidney X roundup?
So there isn't quite yet the first Kidney X roundup. It's still in development. We're gathering funds into the several tens of millions of dollars. We're setting priorities as to where we want to go. But yes, we are aware of the work in Australia and in Japan and in the Netherlands and in many other places around the world. And we hope that all of those folks around the world will participate in this effort together. This isn't a competition. This is something for humanity.
We have one more question, and then I think we're going to have to move on to our next program here.
Thank you, Dr. Sheldon, for coming. I'm asking you a question from an outsider view because I think we're all kind of hoping for the end game here is we can have implantable tissue. So if we have questions related to regulatory concerns of the end product of transplantable tissue, who should we contact? What organization is in charge of that? And the other actually following up question is a lot of people here working on bioprinting mechanism. Is bioprinter going to be considered a medical device? Do we need to get FDA clearance?
Yes. So FDA views whatever it is that you're developing based on its intended use. And if its intended use is for diagnosis or treatment of a health or medical condition, it will be regulated by FDA. The way it's regulated is going to depend on its risk and its classification, and where it's going to be regulated is going to depend on the mechanism of action. The mechanism of action is primarily chemical. It'll be regulated in the Center for Drugs. If it's primarily non-chemical, mechanical in some way, it'll be in the Center of Devices. If it's biological, such as vaccines or things like that, it'll be regulated in the Center for Biologics if it's cell-based. 3D printing tends to come mostly to the Centers for Devices, my center, and we have within our center the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories that is incredibly well familiar with 3D printing. We do our own research in 3D printing to understand how the biology of 3D printing should be regulated, and we're happy to help out with that. So it really depends on where your product might be, and we also recognize that many products are combinations. So we have an Office of Combination Products. We actually have official classifications and designations and jurisdictions, whether it's primarily a biologic with a device component or whether it's primarily a device with delivering a drug. And so we will work together throughout the centers to identify where it goes. If you don't know really where to go or how to get started, send me an email. I'll help.
Thank you. Everyone, please thank all three of our speakers in this session. It's really informative. So for our next program, we're moving into the communicating science side of things. I had a really fortuitous experience a little while ago, a few months ago, I think, where I went to the California Academy of Sciences, and They have these nightlife events at the Academy of Sciences where they bring people over, have fun. You can have some drinks at the Academy, and you can experience just all the different science activities that they have. One of these activities that they had this time when I was over there was a podcast recording from this really neat podcast called This Week in Science. So my friends and I sat there and just listened to them, because it was amazing. So I had the great opportunity to meet Dr. Sanford, who is the co-founder and host of This Week in Science, as well as the Stem Cell podcast. So we got to talking, and I wanted to invite her out to tell us a little bit more about communicating science, because she is really an expert at how do we tell the stories of science. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, that what we do to move the New Oregon Alliance forward and all of the research to help accelerate your work, communicating it is really important. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Sanford to the stage and telling us about communicating science.
All right, I think I'm going to use this microphone so that I can wander around the stage, because I have this habit of being very mobile, lots of moving. So the question is, who am I? I've been introduced. Why am I here? I'm here to talk about science communication. I haven't always considered myself a science communicator. 15, 20 years ago, this wasn't even a title that people used to describe themselves in their work. But now, science communicators are all over the place, and it is a growing field, a growing profession. But science communication is not just for science communication professionals. How many people in the room here consider themselves a science communicator? A few, but some of you are reticent. You're like, oh, am I? Yes. Every day you are communicating science in one way or another. This meeting here is a perfect example. You're sitting here communicating your ideas, talking about science. Now, I started out as a scientist. I studied neurophysiology, enjoyed learning about bird brains and how these little tiny brains are capable of feats of memory that humans would love to be able to do. I mean, I lose my keys all the time, and yet little tiny birds in the Arctic can remember up to 250,000 stores of food. Fascinating work. And along the way, I realized, oh, my favorite times are when I'm out at a conference presenting a poster, when I get to talk to my colleagues about these ideas and the results that I have, or when I'm in front of a classroom talking to the students, hearing the things that they are coming up with in response to what they're learning. And I decided along this path that I think I need to do this. Science communication is what I need to do. And while I was in graduate school, I started this program, This Week in Science. It was this parallel life I led during graduate school. By day, a scientist. By night, radio talk show host for science, And so This Week in Science, it was a college radio show, and it was once a week, and it was something I just loved to do. And then there's this decision time that starts to happen, right? You get to the point of completing your PhD, and okay, am I actually going to apply for a postdoc, or am I going to do something else? And along that decision-making process, my PI decided to move the lab to Europe, and I decided to stay in America. And I realized, oh, I have to figure things out. What am I doing? And it really pushed the process for me. And so I left my show for 6 months or so, handed it off to a couple of friends, and they kept the fire burning for me. And I realized, okay, that's it. I got to go back. I missed it so much. I had to do it. And so I went back, finished my PhD with another PI who I told, I'm not going to stay in academia. I'm just finishing my graduate work so that I can continue with a credible background. So I can say I did all of the training to be a scientist. I went through it. I know how to write grants. I know how to submit papers. I know how to communicate within the academic spectrum. But I can also now move outward to the rest of the world and translate the science that people are doing in, you know, the glass tower of academia to the rest of the world. And so that's what I've been doing. Now I'm a podcast host because technology advances. I'm not just on the radio, now I'm on the internet. I don't just host This Week in Science, I also host the Stem Cell podcast, as Josh said. And I'm also recently started hosting another podcast on personalized health and medicine and technology. And I started a company called Broader Impacts Productions to help scientists tell their stories in video. Okay, now I'm here talking with you. And so my goal today is to communicate with you about the importance of science communication and exactly what you want to do with this roadmap and how you're going to continue to move it outward to make this roadmap even more effective. How can you advance your research better? 'Cause you got a road. You guys are in the home stretch right now, right? You met last year, you're meeting now. This roadmap is going to be edited and put together, and you're going to have direction. But how are you going to tell people about that when you go back to your labs and you're deep in the administrative work or in the bench work? When is the importance of explaining this roadmap going to come up? So let's start with the basic question of what science communication is. Let's start there. The National Academies of Science have defined science communication based on a report they released in 2016 on effective science communication, and they developed a roadmap for how to figure out how to do better science communication. It's pretty great. The exchange of information and viewpoints about science to achieve a goal or objective. Communication, two-way exchange, right? You've got exchange of ideas. Science communication, it's about science. But the big important thing here is that it's to achieve a goal. And I think the important thing to put together is not just that it's science communication specifically, but that this is the exchange of ideas where both parties have goals. You're not just coming into it going, tell me about something, I'm just gonna soak it up like a sponge. Nobody's a sponge, right? The world doesn't work that way. So, we have to understand that information is not enough. Once upon a time, we had this concept of education called the deficit model, or information deficit model. Is anyone here familiar with that term? Okay. So the information deficit model is basically the way that scientists approach informing the public. The idea is that people who are skeptical or have issues with an idea, they just don't have enough information yet. And if you just give them more information, they're going to agree with you. They're going to change their ideas, and they're going to think the way that you want them to think. But that is not the way things work. People are influenced less by facts than other factors. Everybody right now, fake news, you know that term? Yeah, so that's something that everyone's talking about these days, and it's taken hold, another phrase, the post-fact world that we're living in. All of this stuff has been allowed to come into play because we've been thinking about approaching people incorrectly, that if we just give them information, if we give them the facts, things are going to work the way we need them to work. But people come to the communicating stage with their own preconceived notions, their own a priori knowledge, heuristics, and mental models about the way the world works. They have their own numeracy and literacy understanding that affects the way that they respond to a 79% increase in, whatever data you're going to give them. So you need to understand that you don't control your audience. You can't control any of that, but you need to figure out who your audience is so that you can communicate with them best. And context matters. So this context, you're coming here with other scientists to communicate about science. It's a very specific context. But if you're going out to a public forum, where are you? Who are the people that are going to be there? What is the context of that situation? It's going to inform the way that you speak. You have to also consider the language that you use. How do you frame an issue? And I know people don't like to think, in science, don't like to think about framing. Ugh, that's spin. That's bad. But you need to frame something through a lens that your audience will respond positively to, that they will be able to understand. And then you also need to remember that this communication is bi-directional. You need to listen to your audience. You need to go to where your audience is and hear them in order for this communication to take place in the most positive way that it can. So, all right, so